Good evening, good morning, good night, good afternoon, whatever time of day it is, where you are, where you're listening from, or when you will watch this. Thanks. We are back. We're going to complete chapter 4 tonight. Chapter 4 was very, very heavy. But just before we begin, chapter 4, I feel compelled to explain the difference between a person who has healthy boundaries and a selfish person. All right, so before we get into the rest of chapter 4, we're going to talk about the difference between a person with healthy boundaries and a selfish person. Okay, so there are some people who always say no to anything that doesn't directly benefit them. It doesn't matter what time of day, what time of the month, what time of the year, if it's payday, if they're rich or poor, they have extra time, extra money. They just say no. When we're talking about people with healthy boundaries, we are not talking about those kinds of people. All right. Now, here's the thing about it: everyone is within their right to say no. I don't want to do something, or yes, I want to do it. But the reality is, we are all human beings, and at some point or the other, we need each other. And so we do know that some of our time, resources will be given to other people. So as we continue to read the book and discuss setting healthy boundaries, we are going to set boundaries within the response. We're going to give access within the responsibility that persons have proven themselves. So please let us not get a person with healthy boundaries confused with a selfish person who just is all about them. They never have time for anything or anyone outside of anything that benefits them. So let's get into the part 2 of chapter 4. So yesterday we learned that chapter 4 says God takes boundary violations very seriously, and so should we. That is the title of chapter 4. We talked about reasons why boundaries don't work sometimes. And all of these listed here that we went through yesterday have to do with how we basically put other people's feelings and well-being before ourselves. The first one says, I have been more concerned with tending to other people's needs to the point I don't always know what I need. I allow myself to get pulled into debates about the boundary. And so if you haven't already, we have in the chat a question that says, put which number or which numbers that any of these apply to you. Which of these have caused you to drop a boundary before? Now, remember, this chapter is talking about the fact that God takes boundary violations very seriously. And we're going to go into that a little more. One of the main reasons was that, some of us, we just want peace. We want everybody to be happy. We want everybody to be stable. And so we either don't set boundaries or we drop boundaries because we're trying to accommodate everybody else. I heard a statement the other day says there's a difference between when Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers and blessed are peacekeepers. And it was an interesting concept because he used an example of, say, persons or abuse in a family where someone may say, well, we want to keep the peace. We don't want to bother anything. And so the victim isn't able to get the healing and the help that they need because we want to keep the peace. But that doesn't make peace. And so this concept of, I want everybody to be happy, I want everybody to, be calm, and it's not realistic when boundaries have to be made, okay? So today, we're going to go through these reasons here that talk about how boundaries, these are the reasons why God takes boundary violations seriously. Boundaries define and protect freedom. The access requires responsibility. Broken boundaries bring consequences, and consequences should be for our protection, not harm. And so in the book, she uses the story of Adam and Eve For anyone that's watching this and do not know who Adam and Eve is, they were the first people who God created, as we know from the Bible. And so here we see that the boundaries that God set, he said to them when he created them, he put them in this beautiful garden. He said, you can eat of any tree in this garden except for this particular tree, the tree of knowledge, of the knowledge of good and evil. And so have boundaries define and protect freedom. So God communicated the boundary around the one tree they must avoid. So God was clear in stating the boundary, right? And he told them why. The day you eat of it, you're going to know good and evil. So he told them the consequence of what would happen if they violate this boundary. So access requires responsibility. God told them to keep the garden, and the word keep in the Hebrew language is samar, means the guard or protect. So the access that they received to be in this garden came with a responsibility to keep and protect it, right? So broken boundaries bring consequences. Now, for those of us who know the story, we know that they did exactly what God told them not to do, and they had to leave the garden. They had to leave the garden, and God actually put angels there to protect the entrance of the garden. Now, that could sound kind of harsh because we know that these were perfect people. They didn't know anything else other than, them talking with God in the cool of the day. But here is why the consequence of them actually being blocked out of the garden was so serious, because the violation was serious. The consequences should be for our protection. So after they ate the fruit, they had given themselves over to sin. If they had access to go back in the garden and eat from the other tree, the tree of life, then they would have been in an eternal sinful state. Now, here is the thing about that. On the one hand, they would live forever, but be in a sinful state. I mean, when we look at everything going on in the world, I would hate to think that this is just it forever. But on the other hand, because they would have been in an eternal sinful state, their chance of being saved from that would have also been gone with it. And so the consequence that God gave them for violating that boundary was actually for their protection. He wasn't being cruel. And it was for, now that we look at it and we see everything that's going on, it's also for our protection because we have something to look forward to other than, well, this is it, Okay. So as we bring it back to us and where we are, healthy changes in someone can't be measured just by the words they speak. Oh, Lord, have mercy on me. So as we set boundaries and we begin to see or what we think we see some changes, or someone says, well, I have changed, it can't be measured just by the words they speak. And this, I'm reading from page 46. There must be evidence of changed thoughts, changed habits, changed behaviors, changed reactions, and changed patterns demonstrated over a long period of time, as long as it takes. Now, I just want to use a quick example right here. My boys want a dog, full stop. They have been on it for a while, and my husband and I are like, nope. So we have some fish. We have some tilapia fish in an aquaponics system. I have some of the fish in the house. Years ago, before my youngest was born, we had a little fish in a little tank. They don't remember to feed the fish. We've had the aquaponics system now for over a year, and they don't remember to feed the fish at all. But for some reason, they believe that they're going to be able to take care of a dog that requires more of their time, their energy, and everything else. Somehow they believe that they could do that, but cannot just sprinkle some fish food in the tank. So, and that's just, that's like a simple example. But a lot of times, I know for me, I have done that over and over again. Like I get my hopes up again. That's the term. So there must be evidence of changed thoughts, habits, behaviors, changed reactions, and change patterns demonstrated over a long period of time. And as we get to the close of this, you're going to see that this doesn't get easier. This doesn't get, it's not something we just brush off like we set a boundary. It's going to get hard. It's going to get really hard because when you set that boundary, before you could bring back access, because remember in chapter 1, we talked about access, responsibility, and consequences. So in order for us to allow more access or to reopen the door of access, responsibility is going to have to be proven. And that can be offensive. That can be hurtful or seem hurtful to the other person. But remember, we're not doing this to be cruel to other people, to be mean to other people. We are doing this for our own well-being. Yes, baby. Okay, so she used an example. I'm on page 46 and 47 if you have the book, where her youngest daughter and her son-in-law were looking for a house. So there was this particular area where houses were just going up for sale. Long story short, they finally got to view a particular house. They put a down payment on it and a bidding on it, I should say. And they were able to go in and view this house. It was raining on this day that they went to see the house. So they were already aware that the houses in this area would need some renovations, but depending on the severity, they would go for it. So it's raining. They were disappointed, but the rain made it actually a better situation to see the house. So they go into the house. They go into the basement. Listen, y'all, the author, she says it was so much water coming in through the basement. The whole family could stand under, wash their hair and the dog's hair. Like it was that bad. And she brought us something really, really important that she says, changing an outside behavior without changing the internal issue that's driving the behavior is like painting a house that has a crumbling foundation. You're wasting time. You're not getting anywhere. So we can't just look at, oh, they seem to have changed. The healing has to be done on the inside. All right. And so chapter 4, listen, is so heavy, y'all. I'm just gonna like skim through a lot of these like main points until the end. She says, it's so easy to be charmed into dropping a boundary. And we have a warning in Proverbs 31, verse 30, where it says, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, right? So we have this warning already that charm is deceitful. So when I read that, I thought to myself, I need to ask God for wisdom to discern between charm and change, true change. We can have a few good days or even a few good months when it seems things are better. But remember, be honest about what's really happening. Don't continue to excuse negative or destructive patterns of behavior or addictions as if they are just occasional slip-ups and isolated mistakes. There is something deeper going on in the foundational thinking and processing of someone who has been hurting you with their poor choices over and over. Things are better is not the same as things are healed. Things are better is not the same as things are healed. Okay. And if you did any research on the author, you would know so she shares a lot about the struggles that she had in her marriage, the addictions and the things that went on for so long. And basically it all came back to a major relapse of it. I don't want to go too deep into that now, but you can look her up and I'm certain that you'll see on YouTube somewhere a lot about her personal story. And so this is coming from a personal experience. Flags that she ignored. She's like, why is it that I have to wait till a flag is burning before I can say that it's a red flag? A red flag is a red flag, right? And so she has unfortunately learned the very, very difficult way, and she's sharing it. Yeah, my 5-year-old has a commentary. And so she's sharing it with us to be better so that we can set better boundaries and probably not have to suffer into what she suffered. And so she says, Yes, we give grace for mistakes, but when we're talking about ongoing, consistent issues that are harmful, we must acknowledge it and act accordingly. And she uses a very good example with Jesus because um, sometimes, like she says, when you're setting a boundary, people get offensive. And here that she went through a situation, and she says, I felt lost in all the confusion swirling in their accusations against me and their grand statements about how God was with them and that they were praying for my cold heart. Because in whatever the situation was, she had to set a boundary. But when we look at the life of Jesus, Jesus didn't enable people, he didn't beg people, Jesus didn't accept excuses for sin or let people off the hook because they were mostly good. And he instructed them to leave their lives of sin. Yes, he forgave them, but as we see, he called them out. He was like, listen, go thy way and sin no more. Here she says, he called out the Pharisees for their harsh, demeaning, and judgmental attitudes. But we all know that he went to the cross. It was all about salvation for everybody. But he didn't enable or just excuse things because he was so sweet and loving and kind. And so whenever we set a boundary, she says, and someone says, we're not acting like Jesus, yes, we are to look in ourselves, check our tone, our words, and our actions. And I know that I got to check my tone, right? So that's the part we have to be honest with ourselves. But the reality is that many times the problem isn't that, it's the boundary itself. People just don't want to respect boundaries. Now, in conclusion, she says, you're going to make it, and so am I, but it's going to get hard. It's going to get really hard, she says. And here she says that they're going to send accusations. Sometimes you're going to want to drop your boundary. You're going to feel like you're being cold hearted. But remember why we're setting these boundaries in the first place, okay? Not one other human. She said the accusations the person was making against her. She says, not one other human who I do daily life with would have agreed with what this person was saying about me. But this person's words still carried such weight. But she didn't allow that weight to take her to the low point that she probably would have gone to previously. And I think that that's really transparent and really encouraging for us, because as we start to evaluate things that make us uncomfortable, things that we have a problem with, an issue with, whatever where we need to set the boundaries, it's going to get hard. We're not making the author is not making a false claim to anyone like it's going to be all right and you're going to get it done. No, it's going to be hard. There's going to be feelings. There's going to be offenses. There's going to be accusations. But we have to remember that just as much as we want to care for other people's well-being, we have to do the same thing for ourselves. And if it's hurting us, if it's harming us, whether it's physical, our emotions, we have to create healthy boundaries. And so I just want to read the prayer for chapter 4. It says, Heavenly Father, thank you for filling your word with truths on how and why to set biblical boundaries. Please continue to reveal yourself to me as I learn, consider, and process some potentially necessary boundaries I may need to implement in my life. I pray that you would continue to work in me and through me so that I can be the healthiest, most whole, yielded to you version of myself. In Jesus' name, amen. And I claim every word of that prayer. And I pray the same for all of us listening in, that we will get to a place of wholeness and completeness to the point where we can be obedient with everything that God is asking us to do, and we can live our full life that God has called us to. Thank you all for tuning in and for watching. I will see you next week in chapter 5 and 6.